other sort of things while we get ready. So does anybody have any immediate questions? Yes.
What's the best evolutionary step in mobile confidentiality that you've seen in the last year?
So in the last year, we've seen a huge progression in just Linux phones, which means that the software on the devices themselves.
Try the other mic. It's really annoying.
We can
I
hear you
swear.
without mine.
That one had low battery. This one's much better. Okay, so the thing is that with open source technology, we're seeing it sort of infect everything from, the computer where we have Linux and such, to now we're seeing open source software really becoming a big presence on Android devices with like F-Droid becoming a, very nice.
Well, even iOS device. I mean,
Yeah,
so
iOS.
yeah, we're seeing a big resurgence of like open source applications. And the reason why that's like important is so typically most applications or programs, as you know, are like closed source, as in you don't have the code to replicate it, you know what's going on behind the scenes. When the application is open source, you see it kind of pretty much exactly how it functions. So you don't have to worry about like some malicious code in the back end or they're siphoning data to like maybe an offset server. You can see exactly how it works. And like Signal, it's probably maybe heard of, I think Snowden has endorsed it, is like, that's completely open source, we see exactly how it works. Same thing with like even Android is like open source, and there's portions of it. So Linux, like an operating system, is open source. So we're seeing a lot more research of that. But like even so, I think open source applications becoming more and more polished, like essentially equivalent to like WhatsApp or Messenger equivalents. And yeah, I guess Linux phones like the next evolution, even more open source hardware and software.
Okay, we're back. Okay. So, cybersecurity. It's very important. So, the prelude, what is cybersecurity and why is it important for you? So, one of the main things is that it's going to minimize the losses that you experience when you experience some sort of breach. So if somebody takes your device or they somehow get into one of your accounts, you're going to minimize whatever sort of information, data they can get from you. The next thing is that it enables you to do more than what you would otherwise. AKA, your anonymity emboldens you to do things that you wouldn't do if you were a widely known personality, right? So, for instance, you don't want, if you had like a sort of China situation going on, right? You'd be like, I don't know if I really want to buy crypto anymore. So what it does is it changes your behavior. When you have anonymity and security, it enables you to sort of, be truer to who you are, what sort of things you're going to be doing. Also, it mitigates or removes any negative social risk associated with your actions. So again, with anonymity, you don't have to be very fearful of repercussions from the majority, the sort of crowd. And then it also protects you from threats that could actually cause you real harm. So, aka entities, all these other sort of things that are going to, want to cause you harm. Your information is very valuable to them. And we know that it's very valuable to them because they're spending billions and billions of dollars to try and get it. Streamline, all these other sort of things. So, having sensitive information leaked, whatever sort of things you want to keep private, letting important accounts and devices be compromised, and getting organizations the ability to leverage their power against you. Now here are some quick facts that also should give you some paranoia. 95% of breached documents come from either the government, retail, or tech companies. Cybercrimes have risen 300% in the last 2 years, according to the FBI, and has become the largest sector within crime. So if you look at the overall money, it's gone above, I don't know how much, it's around $5 billion, $6 billion to, it's like $1.5 trillion annually. And $1.6 billion are made annually from illegal data trading. So where they scrape data from all these sort of accounts, they get these leaked documents and they start selling them around to other companies, they sell them to each other, hackers, people that want to utilize your bank accounts.
Yeah, even one thing that happened recently with AT&T was the fact that there was an alleged or was a dark web hacker kind of guy, and essentially claiming, oh, I can find anyone's location if you give me money. And the government's like, I wonder how they're doing it because you give them the money, he actually found their location. Later, what they figured out was this guy was some kind of an average dude, essentially with a business account, paying AT&T for information on these people. They give their name and first and last name. And they'll ask AT&T, hey, can I have everyone with this matching data? And they would give that and they could ping their location. So AT&T was selling your information to a random person, which could be nefarious. I mean, so it wasn't anything super technical, just something someone with enough time could do. Figure out exactly where you are, at any given point of the day.
And then also, the government kills based off of metadata.
Oh, man.
Oh yeah, get the fine video. Yeah, because it shut down last time.
They shut it down, guys.
You can't have you knowing it's like classified thing. Listen to it real quickly. Not now.
And you see he's using Brave.
Yeah, exactly.
A brave move.
How many people here use Brave? Okay, most of you guys. That's pretty
Good
good.
base like that.
I mean, I'm not a Brave guy myself.
While he finds it, explain to those who don't know what Brave is.
So Brave is based off of Chromium. So if you guys use Chrome, that's kind of the major web browser that most individuals are going to be using these days. It's, Google-based, but the original thing that's based off of Chromium is actually open source. Brave is just a fork of that is supposed to be, respecting your privacy, so they don't, leak sort of information, they don't run, malicious stuff on your background. And also they are built-in ad blocker, I believe, that, as you utilize it, it gives you attention tokens as a way to incentivize both creators and people to utilize their platform. So now,
You can find out all these things David just said about me, about Dave, about this audience. That is a function of operational capability. I'd like you to talk about whether you're comfortable with that operational capability. If so, why? And how often is it used in the ways that David described?
Yeah, first of all, David's description of what you can do with metadata, quoting a mutual friend, Stuart Baker, is absolutely correct. Okay? We kill people based on metadata. That's nothing.
yeah. So,
Some context.
some context to that clip. Go back to the slides. Pretty big claims by somebody who was was former director of the CIA and NSA. That man was Michael Hayden, and this was during a debate that they were talking about the future of NSA and what it should be going to. It's called the Price of Privacy: Reevaluating the NSA. And in that, he was pretty much agreeing with his opponent that they do a lot of crazy stuff with metadata. They pretty much have no limits on what they can do. Now, a lot of people, they'll ask, what is metadata? And I'm going to be getting into some definitions here. So, data in general is just electrical signals or impulses that can be read and interpreted in whatever way, and they can be encoded onto any sort of device. Now, metadata is typically defined as data of data. AKA, you watch a video, where was that video hosted, when did you access it, how long was the video, those sort of things, how long did you watch that video for. It's data that's associated with data. And so they don't necessarily need to see the video that you watch, they just need to see where that video was hosted, and then they're like, okay, this guy could be a threat.
Or they can determine like where you live based off like the time zone, like when you watch the video. Like if they see like when you access or you're online a couple times a day, they can determine, okay, this guy's at least awake in this time zone, so that limits you a lot. Maybe not your precise address at the time, but pretty close. Find out your provider. Like all this extra data can actually identify you. I think that even the NSA has said like if they have 3 consistent pieces of metadata, they can identify you. Even if you without knowing email content, so let's say it's encrypted. Even with just the title of the email, which typically is unencrypted, they can usually figure out in general what the conversation was about.
And so the thing is that with data is just those numbers, those sort of impulses. Information is the collection of these sort of data points so that it becomes more meaningful. AKA, you see this sort of data and associated with all the other data that's out there, this is a unique identifier, so you're comparing it to everything else. And that gives you some useful information. Now, when I say cyber, so similar to cybersecurity, because some people don't necessarily know this, cyber just is anything that's related to computers, information technology, and sort of digital or virtual reality. Security, that's the freedom or resilience against potential harm caused by others. So when we're talking about cybersecurity, we're just trying to mitigate or totally eliminate the threat that is associated with your computer, your data, your information. So, prelude. I'm going to be going over a few things. First of all, we're going to be talking about threat models. So what are threat levels, similar to home security, what sort of things you want to be worried about, the various threat levels that are out there, finding the best threat level to address you. So anything that is going to fit your lifestyle. And then we're going to go over some strategies such as compartmentalization, decentralization, distribution, encryption, obscurification, and more. And then we're going to quickly go over the tools and techniques that you can use in order to implement your strategies. So, you know, Linux, Fediverse, all these sort of things, asymmetric encryption. So threat levels. What are threat levels? First of all, you have to understand why do you secure the things that you do. Well, we do it not because these information that we're hosting is bad or harmful, but rather because it's important. So if you think about it, like you have a safe that stores your money, you don't want to have everybody know the password key to get into it, even where it is, right? So you want to make sure that everything that you're hiding is important, or everything that you're hiding is important by default. So if your data is important to you, or if it's even important to someone else, it could be worth concealing. Now, threat levels are not determined by what you're protecting, but what you're protecting it from. So what is the enemy on the other side? And you and some other organization or your organization might have a different threat level or threat model than another person's threat levels or threat model. Now, the threat levels, the type of threat levels. I'm going to use DEFCONs because those are kind of cool. So DEFCON 5, immediate access to non-technical unauthorized people, such as your mom. So, you have some files on your computer, but you don't want to let your mom know that you have them, right? I mean, you're playing too much Roblox, I don't know. But the thing is that you want to make sure that, she's an untechnical person, but you don't want to have her immediately access it. So, just putting a password on your account, making sure if you're going to be using the internet, maybe you use a VPN so that anybody that's monitoring the traffic can just see that he's visiting a VPN, things like this and such. Or AK, when you go to a coffee shop, this is one of the most common tactics a lot of people use. They don't know this. People will just be at a coffee shop, they see somebody with their laptop open, they'll see, oh wow, this guy has a bank account opened. And they just kind of run up and grab it. And they run out and they don't close it, and they just take anything that they want. I mean, so being able to secure yourself from that is a little bit more difficult, mostly just not banking at a coffee shop, those sort of things. But, continuing on. DEFCON 4, scammers, phishers, and malware. So the main thing with this is you're going to be sort of going against people that know very little, but it's going to be stuff that's out there. The main defense is your knowledge of what's out there, what to expect. And the reason that this is not necessarily that hard is because they can't do anything other than through your consent. AKA, you open up that link, you do the thing for them, you leave sometimes what'll happen is you'll have what's known as ransomware, and what they'll do is they'll just have a window pop up and it'll say, hey, we're going to encrypt all your files, give us money or else we'll fully encrypt your hard drives and we won't let it go until you pay us X amount of Bitcoin.
Yeah, so essentially that's a generalized attack. Someone just putting it out there and hoping someone will fall for it. So it's not dedicated towards anyone in particular. Typically someone can use malware against the company. That's a very direct attack. But if we're talking about generic things, scamming and phishing, people send you emails. Typically Google or most reputable email, they'll typically mark most of those things away from you. But these are generalized attacks.
And just so that you guys know, because I know that this has happened to some people, the best word of advice for when you see one of these things, let's say it pops up and it says, hey, we're going to encrypt your stuff, it's ransomware. Really what it's doing is it's running that program right then and there. So the best word of advice when that happens is to just close out and turn off the computer, wait, and do a fresh restart of it. Make sure that you're not connected to the internet. Just in case somebody wanted to ask that question. So then, level 3, which is data collection from private corporations, such as Google, Amazon, all these other sort of large conglomerated companies that collect a lot of your metadata. Now, these are a little bit trickier to get around because they're kind of actively looking for your information. They're going to be going through other people as well. So for instance, Amazon doesn't just say, oh, you're on Amazon.com. No, they're getting cookies, they're doing all these other sort of things, they're going on all these other people, they're trying to buy up as much data as they can in order to make a profile of you. But the thing is that they don't really do anything against your will either, but it's just more hidden from you, the activities that are happening. And so as a result, it's a little bit harder to get around. But it's still avoidable because they don't use violence in order to get to you. And they don't really do anything malicious either. Now, DEFCON 2 are attacks from malicious script kiddies / bots. Now, script kiddie is somebody who, they don't know anything about programming, they just copy and pasted some malicious code off of the dark web or something like that, and they're going to be trying to use it against you, such as like, what is it called? Like, you know, the kit.
CaliOS. I mean, there's like, so I mean, like, yeah, script kiddies. So essentially, like, they're non-technical people. They don't really develop the malware, but they use either. I mean, they say stuff off the dark web, but there's stuff on the surface web as well. Like, if you guys never heard of it, there's an open source operating system called like CaliOS or OS, yeah. And it's essentially like an open source like version of like Linux operating system with tons of preloaded open source, like known to the public, mainly for researchers of like, you know, ways to do pen testing or penetration testing, where you intend to try to penetrate a network or hardware. So these are known, and then these people then will use that to attack people. So they have like access to more competent tools, and they're actually using it. And these can be open source too. It's not everything you think like, oh, it's all dark web hackers. Most of this is actually shared with like data researchers and such, but some people can use them nefariously. That's why they're like penetration testing. Like, oh, can these known attacks or, you know, be used to get us? And sometimes they've also used automated bots to do this. I mean, nefarious tactics where they'll start like using like fetching a whole bunch of like newly generated web pages, like if you maybe made your own blog or something, and they'll start like testing ports or like open things on your website, like, oh, is this open? Is this open? Is this open? Oh, it's open. Automatically run the script. So the guy might be doing it intentionally, just like running, going through things, and, you know, trying to find a way to get to you. Not for you generally, but using competent tools to do so.
Okay, and then DEFCON 1, blanket state actor surveillance. So, aka America, China, Russia, these sort of big companies that have a lot of resources that are interested in also your data. They will do blanketed surveillance, and they pretty much will bully, intimidate other corporations to give them the data. They will do, you know, pretty much things like have back, you know, doors to devices, such, all these sort of things. And they generally can get any information that they want from a private corporate actor, but they also implement tools that they only have, such as Stingray, or, you know, the whole NSA with their tools to access. Yeah, Stingray. So Stingray is kind of an interesting thing. What it does is it intercepts your data. So let's say you have a phone and you're just going out to like a party or something like that. They park a van right in front of your place, right? What they'll do is they will intercept the traffic that's coming in. They'll monitor literally everything about it, and then they'll send it off to the person so you don't even notice. It's a man-in-the-middle attack, but it's with, you know, hardware that they can utilize. And then they can also similarly use the same technology to jam whatever sort of signals you're trying to get out. So
it's typically not always used like nefariously. I mean, they use it mainly to catch criminals. I mean, I'm assuming the best intent, but like, so typically like, oh, there's a criminal in the known area, like maybe there's a hacker in your neighborhood. They would take their Stingrays, maybe the operation, the devices, out in your neighborhood to find it. But the thing is, it'll take everyone's data, everything from the cell phone, like it would go to a cell phone tower, it would go to them first, then the cell phone tower. So even you're sending text messages to your friends or colleagues, you know, a lover, that's all intercepted by the van. Even though they're not trying to get you, they have information. And maybe they find something incriminating anyway. Oh, let's investigate him as well. But it's essentially used to catch criminals, but the way it operates, they surveil on people even without a warrant. It's just a general attack, you know.
And like I said before, this sort of information that's collected, you know, similar to like when they read your Miranda rights, it can and will be used against you. Even though they don't necessarily have a warrant on it, they'll see this and they'll be like, let's get a warrant. They'll do whatever they want when they get the information. It's more or less just them being polite when they say, we don't want to do this. Yes?
Would an encrypted messages or something like Signal, like you mentioned earlier, would they be able to see those messages, or would that be hidden from something like that?
No, yeah, so the thing is that's what's known as a client-side encryption.
End-to-end encryption.
End-to-end, so what that means is that you encrypt it with a public key and a private key, and when it's sent over, it'll be de-encrypted with the public key that you have and the other person's private key.
Well, so the person, so let's say we'll use Signal as an example, that's like pretty well known. What happens is it's encrypted on, you're sending a message, let's say to your friend, it's encrypted on your device, then it's sent over the network, and then the person on the other side can decrypt it. So there's no person in the middle who can get it. So well, they could. Let's say there's, you know, a surveillance van, a stereotypical, intercept your data. They will not be able to read the contents of the data, but you might be able to see some metadata, which sometimes is somewhat inevitable. Like, okay, this guy sent a message at this time. and maybe the message was this big. How many kilobytes of data was it? I mean, that's a lot less, it's way better than them reading your actual message, but still it might leave a trail. That's why it's kind of impossible to have like zero metadata, unless maybe you're just like talking to someone personally in a place with no recordings. But we want to minimize that as much as possible. So of course, like just having the time sent is a lot better, but maybe even have a delayed response or where you send a message at only a particular time. But that's kind of how it works. Yeah, end-to-end encryption like Signal will prevent them from reading your messages.
Yeah, so in short, yeah, you'll be secure from the content, maybe not the text. Yes.
Is there like a website to find out where these scammers are or not?
Scammers, no, but we have a bunch of these sort of things we put onto every table if you want to come and get them at the end. They will have your resources for what sort of websites you can go to, information that's going to be useful for the software side of things mostly.
Yeah, typically the scammers and stuff if you have a good antivirus, they typically try to block known actors. So not everyone's known, but a lot of times if it happens a lot, they'll report it and then it'll be put on a list and automatically blocks it. I think even Windows does this by default. There's a lot of browsers. Like Google's like, do you really want to go to that website? It's on our known, untrusted, or they don't have a certified certificate. So of course there's unknown ones where they might have a verified certificate, but now they're acting maliciously or they've been taken over. But you can never truly know who the scammer is always. So. But there is a known list. Same thing with viruses. Once an antivirus researcher finds a virus, they mark it, they'll figure out how it works, and they'll try to prevent that. And that's why you update your antivirus or security as often as possible.
Okay. And then the last thing, which we don't have this in. Oh, sorry. You had a question? Go ahead. Okay. So the last thing, which in the real world we don't have DEFCON 0, but I made DEFCON 0, which is targeted state actor surveillance. This is pretty much where, how people, conspiracy theorists, they're like, oh, I'm getting, what is it called?
I'm on the list.
Yeah, I'm on a list. I'm getting
Gang stalked.
gang stalked, which is like, oh, the FBI is like, look, I went to the movie, they sat down right next to me. They didn't do anything. They're just trying to make me paranoid. But in actuality, that probably never really happens. I have no idea why they would do that when they have all these juicy tools that they don't need to, confront you in person, other than just to make you feel crazy, I guess, which is a strategy, gaslighting. But targeted actor state surveillance is pretty much where they're going to be trying to find out everything about you. They're going to be doing the vans outside.
Well, they have a warrant, or
they have a warrant, all these other sort of things. And this is pretty much, the reason I have it as DEFCON 0, not DEFCON 1, is because it's pretty much impossible to get around unless you're not utilizing any cyber tools such as computers.
Or it's the most paranoid to get around it, or essentially imagine you're Snowden or something. When Snowden was found out, the government's doing everything in their capabilities to catch you. If they don't have tools to catch you now, they might be willing to develop tools to catch you later. They'll make a plan to find out who you are and capture you. I mean, even physically. So let's say you may have some very precious information. Maybe they have no way to decrypt it, but maybe they'll well, we'll just catch him and then we'll Guantanamo him, torture him, so he'll give us the passwords. I mean, so it's the most hardest thing to avoid. Of course, you're gonna minimize it as much as possible. People have done it before. The FBI's like, dang it, we can't get this even with all the power. But it's definitely hard for most people. But again, with these threat levels, how many of you are actually gonna be, targeted state actors? I mean, most people know not really. I mean, unless you're maybe an ex-terrorist or something, or you have something really juicy on the Clintons or the government, I don't know. You're probably not gonna be targeted. Yeah. Or I guess maybe if you're a criminal, even if you're a criminal, you robbed a bank or something, they how deep will they go? Will they go to the most? They'll just they usually do the easiest thing first. Most actually criminals are caught because they self-admit the crime. Not even after get interrogated, but the post on Facebook. It's a lot of drugs for most people. It's yo, look at all these fat cash. I think one of our friends, he also.
I don't know about friend, but he was my first year college buddy. We sat on the same table, but I've kept up with him. Yeah, recently he had he got released from jail, but he's still a felon, and he only had a few months left to go in order to evaluate him to see if he's a felon or not. And he's posting shit about drugs, guns, all these things he's not allowed to have. I mean, at the very least. And then they're like, "Yep, he's going back." I'm like, what the heck?
So the most important thing to take from this slide is to determine what you're worried about. Most people, immediate access is pretty in general. That's why we put passwords on our devices and phones. they maybe could be, we already know there's tools maybe to break it, but a stranger or a friend or colleague, or yeah, even as a general like guy taking it, that's not gonna be an issue. Scammers, phishers, and malware, I mean, that's just in general, like computer security. I don't wanna have to go to Geek Squad again, I mean, most of the time. Private corporation collection, if you know, I don't want that sold.
The way I would say that this is sort of organized is that once you get to DEFCON 3, you have to actually start changing your behavior software and stuff like that. Everything else before is mostly just like add-ons, aka remembering to do things, you know, just having a password, having different passwords and such. But since you're in the hot seat, let me ask you, what sort of threat level do you think you're going to be shooting for?
Probably 4.
4. Okay, sounds good.
Hey, so I got a question about general. So most people use a browser, like say for instance, Brave browser has a built-in VPN. How secure is that compared to like a normal VPN, like a Nvast or other VPN?
Well, I can talk about that a bit more. I know a lot about VPNs. So typically with VPNs, so they're more secure than not having a VPN at all. But I mean, with any VPN, you have to really look at their privacy policy or their policy in general and how they handle the data. Some free VPNs, I don't know about Avast in particular. I think there's one called like Hide My Ass or something like that. VPN, it was very popular VPN in the day. But the thing is, they said we do keep logs, which is like the biggest thing. If they keep logs, that means maybe down the line they'll like you're being investigated by something. I mean, it's mainly used by internet pirates, just like you're downloading stuff for free. If they keep logs, and then they can say, oh, you connected from here to here, so they can tell it's you eventually. Like they're holding on to it. So in theory, you want something that doesn't keep logs, for example, or if they keep logs for how long? Maybe only 24 hours.
And how do you know that? Is that just in the
So
fine print?
typically they release it themselves, their privacy policy, but again,
Audits.
yeah, there's an audit, hypothetically. So it's of course, the privacy policy is a good way for general VPN usage. Will help you in like most cases, unless you're being attacked by, I would say, like a state actor. I mean, I guess the government, or maybe a very dedicated hacker. So most VPNs are pretty much, you know, good for the most part. But the thing is, this is security by policy and not by design, which means they're just like, hey, we're not keeping logs, but how do you know? I mean, imagine like the police, like, okay, like with LavaBit, that was an email provider that Snowden used. They didn't keep any logs, they were very, very secure. But what happened was the government went to them and said, hey, okay, first of all, gag order, you can't say about anything we're changing, but I want you to start keeping logs now. And the thing is, most people, even though the privacy policy looks the same, they're keeping logs now and targeting surveillance and stuff like that. So it's by policy, not by design. That's why some people prefer like mixed nets. Like you probably heard of Tor, like the Tor and the Tor browser bundle. There's also I2P, Lokinet.
We're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, but essentially VPNs that like, okay, so if you're looking for a VPN yourself, which is good to have, try to find one that don't keep logs and have a very good like security policy. I think we have some of the sources.
Yeah, so if you go to the
So you'll give us some that you can refer us to. I already have one, I just want to make sure. That I have it.
Okay, well, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but I will say that some of the ones that we like the most are private internet access and Molvard. Now, the benefit of Molvard, which is pretty unique, I think, to all VPNs, is that you, in order to pay for the service, you send cash in.
Well, you have different options. You can pay with
Yeah, you can pay with cryptocurrency, you can pay with card, or you can pay with cash. You just send in a little mail. You don't put a return address. So they don't know who you are. They just know you have a unique ID, and they're you send money to that account to, you know.
Yeah, Molvard. So what happens is you go to their website.
I mean,
They even have like an onion entry point. So you can, what you're accessing through Tor, which is I think built into Brave as well. It's a pretty cool browser. You can essentially you just generate an ID which has no personal information linked to you, and then you just have to pay them. And then you pay through cryptocurrencies. I think they don't accept any privacy coins yet, but Bitcoin, Litecoin, I mean that's still better than nothing. Or if you really want to, you can probably you can send cash in the mail without a return address to a place with what your account ID is, and they'll activate it. So now, even if the government were to get logs, they wouldn't have any names attached to it, like who it accesses on this date. There's no name attached. They could be correlated through metadata, like okay, maybe he accessed these websites or this time zone, but it's a lot less metadata like than otherwise. So I mean, so providers that don't like require you to enter your own personal information will definitely be better. But for most people, I mean, most VPNs are pretty much good.
Alright, so we've kind of pretty much gone over all this already, but sort of think, what is your threat level? Some of the things to think about are like, AKA your home, what sort of things you're trying to assess about it. Was there a question here?
No, I'm good.
Oh,
I'm just
okay.
fixing my shoulder.
Okay, sorry about that, yeah, just checking. Okay, so what are you trying to protect your, home from? I mean, it could be storms, could be bears, could be opportunistic burglars, could be police raids, kind of like going up the chain, with how much you wanna like protect yourself, how paranoid you are. But the thing is that, the thing to take away also is that you're gonna get diminishing returns the more and more you get into it. So, you're gonna put in more effort the farther you go along it. So you're gonna have to, switch up your operating system. That was already really hard for somebody that doesn't know anything about Linux. Or like, you're gonna have to, now you're like, oh shoot, now I need to, have a bridge and all these other things, and I have to, you're gonna be putting a lot of effort into it the farther you go down, with less and less actual, returns on your investment, if you would say. And then also you have to think about it. What are you willing to sacrifice? Time, money, energy. The ease of use is the main thing that you're going to be losing out on. So, with all these open source softwares, they're becoming, like what we were saying earlier with the question we answered from this gentleman here, was that what is the biggest thing that has, been for security is mainly just the fact that all these open source softwares are becoming a lot more easy to use. And what that allows is a lot more people to enter into it. And then also okay, I'm getting ahead of myself again. But, and then also, will you be able to continue putting the same amount of energy into your security plan that you did before into the future? Because you're going to have to update, you're gonna have to move with your enemy, to keep on evaluating and, assessing those threats. Now, see, these are some fundamental strategies that we're going to be talking about, and this can be applied across the board, whatever you're going to be. It doesn't matter what software you're using, what sort of hardware you're using. The fundamentals of strategies. First one is compartmentalization. So, aka using aliases, different personalities online, in order to, have it so that, like, okay, you're doing your bank stuff now. So the bank, your banking alias, or whatever your finances are, is going to be totally separate from your private alias, which is going to be totally separate from your, shitlord posting sort of alias. You're going to be totally separate from that, because you don't want people to know what sort of, they don't want to be connections between the aliases that you have. Now, also, variant of passphrases, variant. You want to have a whole bunch of different passphrases. You don't want to use the same password across all of them, or same username, because then people are going to be able to say, okay, this is the same username as the one that you had for Facebook. I wonder if it's the same password. It probably is for most people.
Well, I guess like a lot happened, the data leak happens where like a website can get hacked, and then the username and passwords are usually like released, usually in plain text. The hackers find it out, and then what happens is then anyone can see that password, and it's like, well, I know this person has this password, they're probably the same in other accounts. Like, assume, well, what if this service gets compromised? Will it hurt me with my other accounts? Like for your bank, for example, your bank password most definitely should be different than your email password. But the same thing with other accounts. Like, let's say you make a website on YouTube. Is your YouTube password or your Tumblr or something like that different password than your email? Because this gets compromised, I don't want it hurting me, like affecting my email or my bank account. So that's why password differentiation is very important. Some people will take it to a next level where they have passwords that expire or have to change after a while, stuff like that. Just make sure it's like different.
Yeah. And
do you
then,
guys recommend something like LastPass for that?
Well,
like
okay.
a manager, or are you guys?
so LastPass, we're gonna get into the software at the very end, but I understand like everybody has questions about that. But the thing is that we suggest you stay away from LastPass, depending on, again, your threat level, because the reason being is that it's stored in the cloud.
Well, it's not someone else's server.
It's
Still a
someone else's.
server, yeah.
You want to have something that's client-based, encrypted. So KeyPass is a good one because it just has everything on your device and it's just encrypted there. It's not going to be touched by anybody else's servers. And for ease of use, if you're going to have it like across multiple devices, like you want to have the same database accessed by all these sort of things, we suggest SyncThing. So SyncThing it's a sort of application that can sync up your computer with your phone, with whatever device that you have, with files, not just necessarily KeyPass, but your KeyPass database is a type of file that you can sync across all of them. And as long as it's encrypted, then you're going to be able to access it safely from any of your devices. And then the last one is contain all the data. Separate actions by device and place and time. So you don't want to you don't want to be doing the same things at the same place, the same time, in the same way that you do all the time. You want to be able to compartmentalize your life. So you have a device specifically for your Bitcoin mining, and you have a different account that you're going to be using your wallet on. You're going to be using a different
Like a phone,
laptop.
a phone for your business, a phone for your friends, phones for your lover. You know,
I mean, yeah, that's kind of a good analogy. I don't know why it is, but like, you know, because you're trying to keep it away from somebody, you know, that's pretty much with you all the time, which is what the government is. So, you know, having a different device is kind of useful because they don't know what's on that. They can't tell that you have a different device.
Well, there's different ways of doing it. So different device is the best, but
Right.
also there's sandboxing. Even
oh yeah.
now-
So what's here is this it's the operating system called Cubes OS, which what it does is it'll sandbox. I mean, this is really in advance, but pretty much what it does is it just runs a virtual machine and a virtual machine and as many virtual machines as you want. So if one of them gets compromised, it just thinks that's the computer and doesn't know that there's something beyond it. So like, let's say you have your browser open in one of them. Let's say they compromise you because they're using malicious JavaScript. They can't get past that. They just are inside of a virtual machine.
You can't access any other files on your computer.
Yes.
Do you mine on virtual machines? Can you?
Yeah, but it just it wouldn't be very efficient.
Yeah, it wouldn't be as efficient. So with
Cut
virtual,
your efficiency?
yeah.
Also, I'm not sure what you wouldn't necessarily benefit too much out of that.
I could be so. So the issue with virtualization currently is the fact, especially
It's very CPU intensive.
Well, I mean, yeah, there'd be a bit of a loss in general when you're doing kind of virtualization, but currently with the current technologies, for the average consumer, you can't access graphics cards that can actually work on the things. For example, let's say like one of the things that people have been really wanting to in the Linux community is to game on Linux. But there's some things that just don't work, even with like WAN, like a kind of a compatibility layer. So they try, oh, we'll do it through virtualization. But the thing is, a lot of graphic cards drivers, they don't work through virtualization. There's been some efforts to like, change that, but that reason why it won't work for most mining, because most mining is done on graphics cards, at least the most profitable. I think there's some CPU mining ones, but I mean, the best would just have that device is separate. I mean, it's probably the more realistic option, but yeah, that's
Thank you.
no problem.
So then next is the idea of decentralization. Pretty much the thing is that with Amazon, you're going to be using Amazon services for your shopping, you're using Amazon services for the websites that you visit, and also the websites that you visit that aren't Amazon based. I mean, like they have the servers running on Amazon servers. So all these sort of things across the thing, you're centralizing all that data into one point that can have failure. Even if you have different, passwords on each of these websites, it could just be something where all that metadata gets leaked and it's all profiled to you. So you want to make sure that you're trying to do as much as you can on different types of sites, different applications, this sort of thing. So you're not just at the mercy of one point. This is a good sort of visualization of it. Centralization is when you have one point, so you have a whole bunch of stations and they're all linked to the same thing. Decentralization is where you have dispersed, stations that can all intercommunicate with each other. And if one of these their like nodes fails, that's not a big problem because there's still a large portion of the whole overall network
Like
that's
it's like
not
Bitcoin and
compromised.
cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, so like cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, that's what they're going to be like. It's like you have these nodes and everybody's sort of connected to them.
Yeah.
And then distributed is the best, which is just pretty much where everybody's an individual actor, individual server, that sort of thing. And if one goes down, it means absolutely nothing to the rest. Yes?
And is the Web3 there referring to Web 3.0 that is the buzzword currently?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, I just found a picture on the internet.
But yeah, that's what it kind of is. Like essentially like a D-apps and stuff like
Yeah.
that. That's probably closer to distributed, especially if you host it yourself. But if you're like active, like if you might not like people who have like crypto wallets, you may not be actually hosting your own node, but
Yeah.
you connect to a node. So that's like decentralized, not distributed. Because once that node's gone, I mean, okay, I have to connect to a different one. You're not as reliant.
Yeah, but
like
another-
BitTorrent.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
BitTorrent. So another thing is that you might be having access to these sort of things, but you want to make sure that they're also as close to what we call level 1 technology. So a level 1 technology is like
Well, so
like a
this-
chair.
Yeah.
You can fix a chair, right? I mean, it's not too difficult. You can learn how to do it, and you have the resources to do it. But like a level 2 technology is like a fridge. Can you really fix a fridge on your own? I mean, do you know what goes into it? Do you have the parts or capabilities?
Well, so you should see.
So you want to see like if
Yeah.
it's going to be, able for you to be able to fix it, repair it, change it up, that sort of thing on your own. So that way you're not reliant on anybody else. So even if you're like hosting your own version of it, you want to have it as simple as possible so you can actually start to like do these changes on your own without relying on someone else.
Well, like when when you're searching out technologies, when you're searching out technologies, Windows drive most closer to things that are considered a level 1 technology to a level 2. And it's essentially, it's not a binary thing, it's like a spectrum, you know. So for example, like movies. So you can either have a Netflix account, or you can buy a Blu-ray, or like a DVD or physicalized version. So compared to those two, with a Blu-ray, you own it and everything like that. So with Netflix, if they just take a movie off of Netflix, you don't have it anymore, or you stop paying your subscription, or if you don't have internet. So compared to those two, Blu-ray might be more of a level 1 technology compared to that. But maybe a record or maybe a book is a better, closer to level 1 technology information than a DVD, because, well, I can, you know, copy a book by hand if needed. I can completely understand that. Of course, it depends on what you're doing and stuff like that, but in general, you think, okay, how much of this is in my control? And that's like how you see most of the things. Like, for example, Windows versus Linux. With Windows, if let's say Microsoft stops giving updates, like with Windows XP, which like a lot of people freak out about, a lot of big companies, they were really reliant on Microsoft to provide updates and security. With Linux, it's open source, it's closer to a level 1 technology. Like me, I probably can't work on the Linux kernel, but hypothetically, if I wanted to, I could learn it or pay someone on my behalf to do it. So it's closer to a level 1 technology. Like how much? So essentially, just saying, try to pick things or think about things like more in my control. Could I repair? Could I pay for someone? Stuff like that.
Okay, then obscurification, to make your traffic look similar to other people, sort of hiding within the crowd, if you will. This is mostly just about making sure that you look similar to everyone else and you're not just a sore thumb sticking out of the crowd. So you make your traffic look similar, you have your time and activities during or when other people are doing things so that they can't create a correlation. You be sure to not closely match your habits that you would outside of your alias. And you use proxies, VPNs, and mixed nets to obscurify the source of your online traffic. Then encryption, I mean, this is not necessarily a strategy, but more or less a tool. Just use client-side encryption when possible. Asymmetric is usually best when it comes to encrypting, depending on what your use is. And also, people, they tend to use the word military-grade encryption. It's not military-grade encryption, it's just the encryption that works. If they say military-grade encryption, it doesn't mean anything. It's just whatever works. It's just a higher number of numbers and stuff. And then lastly, we're going to take a brief look at tools. Now, this is the site that we have on here called Prism Break. And this is what'll happen is when you use Prism Break, you'll go on the website and it will show you the devices to use, so like Android, Apple, PC, those sort of things, and then even like web browsers, and it'll have. Sorry.
Oh, it's gonna pop up and show the website. This is like when you go there, you'll see stuff like this. So if you want to de-Google your phone,
yeah. So for mobile, it'll have like Android, iOS, and you click on that, and it'll give so like Android people. Most of you guys use Android, I assume. Okay. So if you go to Android, it'll show you like things like what they suggest for your anonymized networks.
Like alternatives. This is essentially, instead of being relying on like Google things, like instead of using a Google Play Store.
So, and I know a lot of people were interested in the idea of de-Googling. Now, the thing is that if you want to truly de-Google your phone, it's going to be a lot more difficult than this, but this is sort of a good first step without you having to know a whole bunch about the technology or invest a lot of time into it to start de-Googling. So it shows you alternatives of apps you can use. Now, this is the whole concept of decentralization. So instead of you using Google Apps for everything that you're doing, you can just use the sort of alternatives to it.
Yeah, so this is like a good
So
jumping off
yeah,
point.
like we talked about Signal instead of using Discord, Facebook, all these other sort of things, because they're gonna be more private free.
Yeah,
But
big example. I mean, also really computing, if you're doing network stuff.
yeah, network stuff, all these, it has a good breakdown of everything that you
Yeah, they got
want.
stuff also for iOS. So if not, even if you're not, using
If
Android
you're using
phone.
Apple,
But
it'll
again,
still give
these
you suggestions of what
essentially-
you can do,
yeah.
opposed to just letting them do whatever they want with your app. But pretty much the questions could be endless here, because everybody has questions about software, what to use, how to use it, that sort of thing. So I'll just open it up for questions. Anybody? Yes.
As far as securing your devices, can you speak to maybe the difference or pros and cons for like Touch ID, Face ID, 4-digit passcode versus those kind of things?
So again, depending on your threat level, a password of any kind is better than no password of any, because then that prevents people that are idiots from just getting into your phone or devices. But the thing is that with biometric verification, which is like the face scans, thumbprints, pretty much anybody can force that out of you at any time. They can just get your finger and just do that. They put the camera in front of you. You see it in movies all the time, right? Knock them out.
But I mean,
Yeah, they remove their eyes, that sort of thing. They can like get your fingerprint. But the best thing is the thing that doesn't have anything physically associated, which is using passphrases.
Well, and also, yeah. So nothing biometric is bad. I
Yeah,
mean,
biometric is bad.
it's meant for immediate access.
But you-
and you also have to, in theory, it's a really complicated password, your fingerprints, whatever. But the issue is, of course, it could be forced out of you.
Or also they have some
Like
degree of
remote-
error.
Yeah, probably. So same thing with like for example, a remote attack with biometric authentication makes it a lot harder. But the thing is, these tools are actually useful like with each other. Like maybe you have a long password, but on top of that, need as a face scan and a fingerprint and iris. If you could do like multiple at the same time,
2FA.
exact two-factor authentication. Like there's even hardware two-factor authentication things, like a USB key into your phone and your password and whatever ID. So like they can work a junction to each other. But the best kind, of course, I think password and two-factor is like the best.
Over here.
So kind of what you were talking about with two-factor authentication on phones. Do you have any advice on how to like minimize your risk of like a SIM attack? Like if you're using a cell phone, like I've heard instances of people being able to like hack someone's Coinbase that has two-factor authentication because they like literally call the phone company and like pretend to be them. Maybe they have some of their data and they get them to like swap the SIM basically on your cell phone and then they can access your accounts. Like, you guys have any advice about maybe how to minimize risk like that?
Yeah. So there's different kinds of two-factor.
Wait. I'm sorry about
I
that.
get ahead of myself. Yeah, there's different kinds of two-factor authentication. The most common one is the phone one. Like phone, as in they send an SMS, like a text message to your account. But the thing is, as you were saying, the people call your phone company and they're like
Spoof it.
Yeah, they spoof like, hey, I'm you, or they buy information, but and then they can take you. So essentially, there's different kinds of authentication app. There's a picture of one of them. But using there's some apps which don't rely on like SMS will make it a lot harder to spoof, along with hardware two-factor authentication. But for these websites, see if they have options to have things more than just the phone authentication. Like either an application, which they can't contact an app, especially an open source app. Hey, yeah, I locked myself out. It's like a lot better. Or of course, hardware is the best because you need to be in your meeting access to grab it. But try to find ones that don't rely on phone. Better than nothing. But try to find things that don't rely on like a third party, which they could call. The downside, of course, is what if I actually lost my phone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so like if you have like a Google Authenticator or something like that, I mean, can that still be accessed if someone gets a hold of your SIM?
It's a lot less with Google. I mean, so they have access to your Google account, and as lucky as we are, Google isn't. I mean, I don't like Google personally, but they've been not hacked recently. I mean, even compared to Apple, so it's definitely a better one than like nothing. There's open source alternatives, but a company that hasn't been compromised before and stuff like that. Phones all the time. You heard spoofing. I think I just told you AT&T selling money to a dark web bounty hunter. So. Yeah, try to find one at Google Authenticator, open source authenticator, or a hardware key where you hold it. Make sure maybe you have backups because what if you lose it, then you lose access to the account. So have stuff like that.
Any other questions? I know you guys have a lot of questions.
Were we talking about Brave browser? We were talking about Brave browser earlier. Are there, and it seems like a lot of people are already using it, are there any enhanced features we could have with that, whether that be like settings changes that we should be making in there, implementing, or add-ons that we should be downloading in addition?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few add-ons, and you will actually see it on, again, the Prism Break is one of the best websites you can go to for this sort of resources very quickly.
DuckDuckGo.
Yeah, so like DuckDuckGo is a web browser you can use, and but the
Search
main,
engine.
yeah, like this is a search engine that you can use that's going to be beneficial for you because it's not going to be leaking your data. But there's a lot of other things as well. So for instance, the web browsers, they have add-ons such as yeah, like this. So Privacy Badger is a good one because pretty much it just blocks malicious JavaScript. NoScript is the best one for it because what you can do is you go and you'll say, okay, I don't want this type of script running from this website, and you can blacklist or whitelist whatever you want on there for websites. This again with the whole idea of
I think
compartmentalizing your information. The multi-account container is pretty good because you can say, I just want these accounts for this, that sort of stuff, so the cookies don't follow you when you go between different tabs. All those things.
A lot of these are built into Brave, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
I don't think all of them are, but like I don't think NoScript's built in. I mean, that's one of the best ones. So that, when people get hacked on the dark web,
Like most of the time when people get some sort of compromised thing when they're web browsing is because there's the web browser is playing some sort of JavaScript in the background, right? And the JavaScript can pretty much just do whatever it wants. So also there's just privacy settings in general. Like if on I don't know too much about Brave, but I know on Mozilla Firefox, if you go into the settings, you'll have the privacy settings, and it'll be strict, not strict, whatever. And strict just means that it's not really running JavaScript. That's the main thing people have when it comes to
at least hackers.
hackers, you know.
So HTML, what happened? They just send you essentially more like a word text thing, and like, okay, turn this into pretty pictures and such. With JavaScript, I mean, the cool thing, you can do things like run video, interactive elements, drop-down menus, but what's doing is it's executing code on your computer. JavaScript has been trying their best to make that as secure as possible, like less kind of loopholes, but people always find them. It's pretty easy. I mean, the worst was Flash. Flash is the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Remember back in the day when people use Flash, it's the same thing. It's executing code on your computer to do cool things, but it was very, very insecure. I think it should be Shockwave or something.
Yeah.
But to turning off JavaScript is
Yeah.
worried about like hackers and stuff, or sites that don't necessarily need it to work.
Yeah.
But these are good like jumping off point. Yeah, again, Prison Break is pretty good, like to find add-ons and such to make it more secure. But Brave, I think, has most of these things.
Did you have your hand up?
Oh, no.
Okay. Never mind. Yes, you.
So, I've got a work program that runs on Java.
Uh-huh.
Is there a way to separate it?
Oh, so you have an application that runs Java? Java is different from JavaScript. So they're...
Well, it keeps popping up. I don't remember which one it is, but it keeps popping up saying that they're basically just going to discontinue it.
Uh-huh.
But at the time, it's an app that has to be used for work. Is there a way to separate that from where you can have that will work without the turn it off on the other, like the other pages where it just works when you're using that actual?
Yeah, I mean...
NoScript has
Yeah.
settings where you can only have it run on certain sites or certain.
This guy knows more than me. But yeah, the NoScript is great because what you can do is you can say, okay, I'm going to whitelist this website. I have to use it for work. So, you know, you can let it run. But you don't want, like you're like, okay, I really don't want Google to have run this sort of script in the background, but I'm okay with this thing because I trust it, right?
Or sometimes, like,
Or you can also just temporarily trust it. It's not necessarily...
essentially, it's like minimizing your metadata, minimize your access to giving JavaScript, especially to untrusted actors.
Again, like it's like having a footprint. You can't have a zero footprint, but you can pretty much make your footprint very small in that way.
Yeah, like for example, YouTube will not work without JavaScript.
Yeah, your YouTube doesn't work with JavaScript.
Twitter now, I don't know why. I think because of the
They used to work with script. Twitter used to work without JavaScript, but now they won't even let you run it without JavaScript. We're running. Any other last questions, concerns, comments?
So I was speaking last time with you a little bit about Monero. Can you just kind of maybe talk about some of the benefits of using a privacy coin and why you would want to?
We're talking about it.
Tell me about secret.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, we got this guy millions of dollars off a secret.
Yeah, maybe to differentiate between like privacy coins and like most cryptocurrencies. Most cryptocurrencies, for the most part, it was called pseudonymous. It's anonymous. Pseudonymous is so different than like that your identity is known. It's just that your identity is related to whatever you're using with it. So if you make a purchase with like Bitcoin, for example, to another account that's gifting it, let's say to a random address, and that address is also like random, like all on the dark web essentially. They couldn't know much other than that address gave it to this person. But once you start doing things like buying things and sending to an address, you send it to the company. That company has to have your address to ship the product. Now they can associate, that crypto address with your real life address. And this has like some problem with the fact is then they can start, either targeting you for, either upselling you because now they know how much money's in your account, or who you've related to. Like, oh, you purchased on this website, or donated to this content creator. Do you know he was a racist? I mean, like something like that. Like that could affect you, like down the line, stuff like that. As well as going to stores. You go to a store, you pick a purchase, like, wow, this guy's loaded, and they could rob you. So privacy coins, for the most part, what they try to do is have stealth addresses where you sending a transaction to someone, they don't know which address it's like.
Charge the battery is low.
Okay. Who was that?
Talk faster.
Yeah. So then you try to hide it. And so the benefit, of course, is people cannot know how much cryptocurrency is in your account, which helps a lot, even with trading. For example, if you're trading with someone, know how much money you have, that's bad. If you're hiding it from like a government organization like China, let's say the China version of IRS for some reason, yeah, that's like really good for that. But it's again, it's also makes it hard for people to like target you specifically because you can generate a new stealth address. There's Monero.
Charge the battery is low.
So Monero is the most popular, I think the highest market cap and privacy coin. I think everyone's heard of it, the drug dealer coin, though it has a lot of legitimate uses. There's Secret, it's a new one, which is a version of, I would say kind of like Ethereum, but it has like private smart contracts, I mean to a degree. I mean you can't have 100% private smart contract, but the data on it is obscured, you can't see things on it. That's like pretty cool technology. It's called a secret network. There's also
Charge the battery is low.
I'm gonna turn it off when I just like
Just ditch it. But the things that we've covered a lot of things, and I know some of you are not necessarily super advanced in this, so a lot of it was too much information. But I don't know if we'll have to do this. But show of hands, how many would you guys want like a follow-up that's more targeted on a specific subject?
I'm gonna go ahead and turn the microphone off so it doesn't keep doing that.
Yeah.
to us. So everyone just
Thank
speak
you
loud.
so much.
Yeah.
Oh, one.
Not a question, I just want to say thanks, lots of good, useful
Yeah, great
information,
stuff.
appreciate you guys doing this.
With Bank of America and US Bank coming out with what are called crypto custody services, do you guys consider that an excellent welcoming into crypto, or is it going to become what is it sounds like it might be just a huge threat?
again,
Because you have to tie into the system to work the system.
Right.
Yeah,
It's not really a cryptocurrency because the idea of cryptocurrency is that they're all decentralized and you have a distribute. The whole reason we have miners is, and a lot of miners that are incentivized is because we want to have a distributed network. With the whole idea of like a bank doing it and having just a blockchain, it's just them using it as a ledger that they can verify. I think it's okay to get people sort of interested in it as long as they understand what's going on and it's not a cryptocurrency.
Like
This has actually been a strategy, and the government actually has admitted it, that what they're doing is, what's it called, like poisoning the well. They're pretty much just putting out these things and they're associating the names with each other all the time so that you kind of associate them all together. So digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and then in the mind of most people, they're all the same thing, but they're really not.
But yeah, so
just as long as people know what it is, that I think it's fine.
I guess like level 2, level 1 technology, like, okay, do I want to trust the bank with my cryptocurrency or a form of cryptocurrency, or rather have it myself? I mean, some people might think, do I want to run a web server myself on my own home because do I know how to secure a network? Even though it's less out of your control, you have to realize, okay, but that's better for me. Same thing with like Netflix. Do I really want to buy every Blu-ray and watch like any kind of new movie coming out? No, probably not. Netflix is good. Just know what it's about. I think it helps get people in because I've seen a lot of times people are new to like cryptocurrencies and they've gone into Robinhood, which I feel is like one of the worst ways to get it. But it at least like dips a toe in the water and they can like, okay, now they can understand why it's bad. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Focus on adoption.
But I mean, I think people should be clear. The companies probably won't to what they're getting into. Like a lot of trading platforms, like
Well,
wait,
they're not.
Yeah.
I'm telling you that they're not.
Yeah.
And that's my concern is that it's great to see that they're going to offer in avenues for adoption, which is awesome to the general user. But then what?
Yeah,
exactly.
Then what is what I'm.
Yeah, it's like a burn zone, like Dex is.
Yeah, the main thing is like education. I think is very important because again, adoption, like we said, is the biggest thing. Because also, if we have more people looking up cryptocurrency, then it's going to be a lot harder for them to pinpoint. Oh yeah, this guy's using cryptocurrency. If everybody is looking it up, right? I mean, they can't just use your web traffic as a avenue of finding out who you are.
Were you talking about CBDC or is that what?
Oh yeah, it's like central bank. What's it called?
Central bank digital
Yeah,
currencies.
yeah.
Those are so like the Federal Reserve is the central bank. A lot of you guys know this. But the thing is that China is rolling out this new thing like a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, and they're pretty much just calling it a cryptocurrency, but it doesn't have any of the positive benefits of a cryptocurrency. And they can do things like, they can just put money into somebody's account. They can just take it out of your account with them whenever they want. They can see all of your purchases that you're doing. They can block certain purchases. They can add just stealth taxes or taxes into any sort of transaction that you're doing. There's a lot of things that they can do. But So stay away from those, I guess.
I mean, sometimes it's not always malicious, like this whole like what's cryptocurrency. Because a lot of people are told, yeah, Bitcoin's anonymous. It's like digital cash, but in some ways it's like less anonymous than cash in itself. Because with cash, if I give you like $2, you don't know how many dollars I have stored at home. So I mean, sometimes it's just a general misinformation because people don't truly like know it and stuff like that. I mean, just try to make sure people are always skeptical. I mean, don't be super paranoid. Don't be always super tinfoil hat. But to like think, okay. Who's like owning this truly?
I think we were totally getting gang stalked today. That's why everything was going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Why the battery dying in our mic and our laptop? Charged this morning, I swear. Yeah.
Can you guys just like I'm probably not gonna rebuild my Android phone and like it's a lot of work and stuff. But it's like, can you guys give like a lot of people are using Brave browser, but like what are like your top 3 things that just like normal people can do outside of like multiple passwords?
You guys are gonna love this one. So if you guys use if you guys have an Android device, which I'm assuming most of you guys do, you should download F-Droid. If you go on the web, if you go to your web browser of choice, Brave or something like that, you go and you look up F-Droid APK, and what that is it's an app store for open source software for the Android device. And there's tons of you can just go through there and just look at it and see what sort of apps you want to replace the old apps with. That's like probably the fastest way to start de-googling your phone in terms of going to the better alternatives. One of my favorite ones is people don't know about this is NewPipe. It's a replacement to YouTube, but the thing is that all of the videos that you're watching, it's pretty much they data scrape it and then they give it to you. But you can download whatever videos you want from there. There's no ads. It's perfect.
You play audio in the background without YouTube Premium.
Yeah, you don't need YouTube Premium to just like. So again, like what I'm saying is that with the ease of use and the benefits of these open source technologies, hopefully if people just know that they're out there, they're going to start using them because they're free. They aren't running anything that you don't know on your device. It's just a way better thing for consumers. Like you can't beat free and open source.
So I keep hearing you talk about Androids.
Yeah.
So for those of us that don't have
with iOS it's a bit harder. There's open source apps for iOS. The reason why it's a bit more hard to get because I think Apple's policy.
Yeah, they don't allow you to download stuff from like web browsers.
Well, no, so you can jailbreak your iPhone.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. That's one way. But also on the App Store itself, they don't like things that are under the GPL license, which stands for the GNU Public License. So you guys probably all heard of copyright. Don't steal my movie and stuff like that. So there's a thing called copyleft, or the terms are usually still on the GPL license, which means if you actually ever use this code, if you ever make any copy or rendition of it, your code also be open source, which is like the opposite of copyright. You can't touch this or change it, without permission. Apple doesn't like that, having apps with it on there. So a lot of apps, there is open source apps on the App Store, but usually they're under a dual license. And usually you can trust these people to just make a separate account, these app developers of the open source applications. Like as I told you earlier on, Prison Break, there are open source apps, but it's hard to find it. There's no open source repository, which makes it a lot easier to find them. But there is ways to find apps that are open source, like Signal, for example. That's an open source app. It's available on iOS. It's just the fact is there's no immediate app store that has only open source apps. That's a good way to get into it. It's not impossible. I mean, in theory, you can jailbreak your phone, then you can find open source apps or run your own one. But it's a lot more difficult on that than it is on Android. There's Linux phones coming out too.
Oh yeah, Linux phones. We were going to talk about because they wanted us to talk about it was Linux phones and Faraday cages. So Faraday cages, we're talking so much subject, but a Faraday cage pretty much just blocks the signal from getting in or out of a device because it wraps it around in a.
It's a block. So essentially, if you ever heard of Snowden, how we prevented monitoring when doing interviews, put his phone in a microwave or something, that's a form of a Faraday cage. There's things called Faraday bag, which is a lot more useful. I mean, practical as the top your tablet, laptop, or phone. And then it's essentially impossible for a wireless attack, or as I said earlier with AT&T pinpointing your location because someone bought it. If it's in a Faraday bag, it's impossible for it to be contacted. And so like that.
And then the thing is that with Linux phones that are coming out, they have a lot of the new ones like the Librem 5 and the Pine Phone 1. They have hardware kill switches. So instead of you having to rely on a bag or anything like that, or just the cell phone company's mercy, they're going to have physical kill switches for the cell phone signal, internet signal, camera, these sort of things.
Which is different than a software kill switch. A software kill switch is I turn off my Wi-Fi, put on airplane mode. But in theory, let's say you have malicious software on your phone.
It just pops it back up and again.
Yeah. Hardware kill switch, it disconnects the cable. So, I mean, it's a switch. So like a light switch. So I could turn off my Wi-Fi and it's impossible, unless with hardware, to turn it back on. Along with, other stuff like that, webcams.
In your opinion, is it safer to have a Droid or a Apple iPhone?
That's a debate. I'm not going to say, oh yeah,
Okay,
Android's
well,
the best and
right.
stuff like that, but
If I had to give an advice between the two, Android would be better.
iPhone's a lot more
You should go with
safe.
the links above
Yeah.
all else.
Yeah, I would say iPhone's a lot more secure by default. I mean, I can give them credit. They've been a pretty secure device. They've had a lot more exploits throughout the history than Android has. So I'm not going to bash like iPhone because I don't use it. Yeah, exactly. Android though, if you want to on your own harden it, it's a lot easier to do it yourself. With iPhone, you're kind of more or less relying on iPhone security and such. iOS is completely closed source. Android is partially open source itself, so there's actually forks of it. Also on the papers, like there's you can technically flash your phone with things like Graphene OS or it's a Kali SOX. I have it popped up here, but which are essentially versions of your Android, which are more hardened by default, like more virtualization, less apps having access to your phone and stuff by default. But yeah.
And then also a big part of the whole thing, again, what I was telling you about the keeping up with your enemy, the biggest tool, again, with education is the having information yourself. So being up to date on all of your software and stuff like that, and then having the knowledge updated. You have to like have news feeds pretty much running for tech all the time. Seeing what's the new sort of stuff to go against, like what are the new devices they're going to be using in order to steal your information, and how do you combat that? What are the newest leaks? All these sort of things. So being updated with the news on these sort of things is also very important.
10 years ago, I would have said Apple has a lot more default security and apps that have security built in than Android. But nowadays, Android is kind of caught up by itself as an operating system, and the apps available, especially open source apps, are more secure. But there's also open source secure apps for iOS as well. So I prefer Android gives you a lot more ability to harden if you want to, like future proofing. But if you just want someone secure, say, okay, iOS, since you're not going to be flashing your phone or anything, you can download iOS, use Signal, stuff like that, like the apps that are on like Prison Break and such.
All right. Yes.
You guys are giving us so much information. How do we connect with you?
Oh, we were gonna put a session ID up.
We give her a phone number or something, but since we did this whole presentation on like Linux, and then we we don't have a Linux laptop. We put it to like our Windows one, and then the whole thing got kind of changed. We had to redo it like last minute. Yeah. So.
We'll send an email out. We have everybody's email address, so we'll send it out to everybody.
Yeah, we'll do some follow-ups and more particular thing. We're just doing it's like a big
We're also doing tech and security consultation if you guys want that for specific, whatever your needs are.
You guys need a Lightning Wallet donation address.
Yeah, we're thinking about
or Monero, Yeah, Lightning, for sure.
Great work.
All right.